So we're talking about artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence has become one of the most prolific developments of our age. Is it to be welcomed and embraced, or something to be feared and challenged? Are we moving into an age where more than ever the truth is whatever the most powerful say it is? Or are we moving into an age where the seemingly limitless power of AI offers the opportunity to proclaim to the world the truth that really sets us free? Is what it means to be human under threat, or are we moving into an age where humanity can finally be all that God calls us to be? I've no idea. But I know two people who might just have a clue. Archbishop Doyé Agama is the founder of the Apostolic Pastoral Association. The APA was initiated in the north of England to support the training and recognition of minority ethnic church leaders. The APA later became the Apostolic Pastoral Congress, with Bishop Doyé consecrated as its first archbishop in Southwark Cathedral in 2013. The Reverend Professor David Wilkinson is a British Methodist minister, theologian, astrophysicist and academic. From 2006 until 2023, he was the principal of St. John's College. David is a professor in the Department of Theology and Religion at Durham University, and since September 2023 has been the director of Equipping Christian Leadership in an Age of Science. David is the author of several books on science and religion, a regular contributor to Radio 4's Thought for the Day, and is a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. And to add a personal note, David, I must also add that way back in the last century, David was an undergraduate in the same Durham College as myself. During this session, David will reflect from a Christian theological perspective on the regulation of AI, the science and the impact in theological studies, and Archbishop Doyé will address integrating AI into a Christian ministry practice. But first, please welcome Professor David Wilkinson.
Good morning, everyone, and what a delight and privilege it is to be invited to speak here. I'm so thankful for the work of the Forum. This is my first time I've been able to be here, and thank you for this opportunity. And it's also a delight to be sharing this session with Archbishop Agama. I work for this project called Equipping Christian Leadership in an Age of Science, and I have my colleague, the Reverend Dr. Catherine Pritchard. Catherine, just stand for a moment so that people know who you are. Yes, indeed. Catherine is our lead on AI. She is a member of the Faith and Public Life team at the Church of England and is one of the most important voices in the realm of AI, and I owe a great deal in my own thinking about AI to Catherine's pioneering work in this. Our work at Equipping Christian Leaders in an Age of Science works with senior Christian leaders. We're based at Durham, York, and at Lambeth Palace. But I live, move, and have my being in Newcastle. And for those of you here last night, I'd just like to extend my personal sympathy to Cardinal Nichols on the way that we outplayed his Liverpool team complete. Oh, please forgive me. It'll be another 70 years before we win anything. If you go to ChatGPT and ask what football team David Wilkinson supports, or at least if you did a few months ago, you come out with the answer of Aston Villa. I'm sorry about that. Even though I have written, broadcasted on numerous occasions about my love and passion for Newcastle United. I'll leave you just thinking about the implications of what that means for AI as we go through the talk. AI makes headlines daily. You'll have seen them as much as I do in just about every area of life. And this is overlaid by a mythology of science fiction. of robots taking over the world, oppressing, as well as liberating. But I think this myth of killer robots is dangerous, as it takes us beyond some of the questions that are here now and important for our society. And Debbie wonderfully illustrated those in just a few minutes in a way that's going to take me a quarter of an hour to do. As one Google vice president puts it, the immediate threat to humanity is not killer robots, but rather the threat of biased algorithms. In his beautiful book, Archbishop Agama says this, and I love it. He says, successful, he's talking about digital transformation, requires a balanced approach concerning strategic vision, cultural readiness, and technical excellence. Often when we come to AI, we often get immediately into the technical excellence. There's something really important, I think, about the strategic vision and cultural readiness when we come to questions of regulation, as we come to questions of implementation. And my talk is just a little commentary on those two first things from a theological point of view. What does it mean to think theologically in our strategic vision, our cultural readiness? And for those of us who've seen lots of technologies over the years since the last century, whether it be, for instance, genetic engineering, I think the church has fallen into two extremes. The first is to say, isn't this wonderful? Let's use it for evangelism. We saw that in television, in the growth of the web. Let's look at it uncritically and just go for it. Or it's all evil. We shouldn't have anything to do with it. And the story that's often trotted out is the Tower of Babel, the making of bricks and building of towers. Remember, in that story, it's not the bricks or the towers that are wrong. It's what the motive is behind it. And that is the belief in science as saviour, as Mary Midgley put it many years ago. We will not be scattered across the face of the earth if we build ourselves a tower. We'll be our own protector rather than the Lord. And as Trevor Hart and Richard Borkham pointed out a number of years ago, the hope or the myth of human progress is not a biblical hope. The myth of human progress is that science, technology, education will lead us to a new utopia where all will be well. Those of you who are Star Trek fans will probably know that Gene Roddenberry bought into the myth of human progress. When we go into the technology of space and the Starship Enterprise, all will be well. Human division will all be put aside. A few problems with Klingons now and again, but on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise, all will be well. The trouble is that it doesn't work. And in fact, that sense of science becoming a power over others actually leads to division and scattering, as it does in the Tower of Babel. And that sense of technology as evil, let's not have anything to do with it, I think in my mind is always questioned by a parable in the New Testament, which is the parable of the talents. And when it comes to risky things, am I going to be someone who buries the talent in the ground? And the Lord says, I gave you this gift. Why haven't you used it as gift? So I'm going to rush through, if that's all right, because we've got limited time in a very, very rich program. But I'm going to offer you some theological themes, which for me I find important as I come to AI. They're not normative, they're not exhaustive. They may, I hope, just encourage you to think more about these things. But these are the things that are important for me. And I hope you'll see scriptural credibility as we go through. The first is this. AI needs to be seen in the context of God's gift of creativity. I loved the worship this morning. Loved the passage from Colossians. In him all things were created. In him all things hold together. Colossians 1:15 and onwards. The affirmation of the goodness of the world and that we are created in the image of a creator who creates good means that we recognize that the gift of creativity is a gift that is good, to be celebrated. Whether it be machine learning or deep learning or generative AI, in breakthroughs in medicine, science, education, communication, transportation, production of either agricultural yields or clean energy solutions, or even in wealth creation, are we prepared to thank God for the opportunities that AI gives us? And if we thank God for the opportunities that AI gives us, are we prepared to thank God for those who work in AI in our churches or even outside our churches? Phil Hefner many years ago talked about human beings as created co-creators. Made in the image of God, our creativity is a reflection of God's creativity. And I just wonder whether, and thank you, Bishop Paulina, for that wonderful reminder that it's not just the church leader, but what about the coder or the entrepreneur, the teacher, the engineer who works on these systems? Do we see in them and affirm a Christian vocation, a Christian calling? How do we pray for them? How do we use their gifts within the church, which is about the entire priesthood of what the Lord is doing? So something about creativity as gift. The second thing is creativity is about work, play, and rest. I love the narrative of Genesis 2 and 3, and the sense that in the garden there was work to do. This was pre-fall, to till the garden and keep it. There's something good about work. But also there's a playfulness in Eden. I can't read the story of the naming of the animals without a sense of humor going on. You know, all these animals being brought and to be named. I mean, I just think that's some divine playfulness going on. And then rest. I think there's been a lot of discussion about AI and work. But actually, most of us play around with AI and ChatGPT, and we get embarrassed about it. What's our theology of play within the church? As a scientist, play is very important. It's about experimentation, part of the scientific method. And I mean, it's all right to go to AI and to ask the question of ChatGPT, tell me a few jokes to tell during a talk to a Christian congregation. Do you want a few? Yeah. What do you call a Christian who loves to tell jokes? A fundamentalist. Why did Moses wander around the desert for 40 years? He was trying to find the Wi-Fi. I mean, they're not terribly good, and we've probably heard them elsewhere. But I mean, there's a playfulness. And in gaming, very, very important. What's our understanding, our theology of gaming in all of this? These are questions which go beyond just questions of work and employment. And my plea is, can we have a theology which takes entertainment and play and rest seriously And how do we see AI in all of this? Third, you still with me? Is this all right? Creativity is given in community. The God of creativity is the God of Trinity. We are made in such an image. Male and female, he created them. The full expression of being human is not about an individual power, fame, accomplishment. Elon Musk is not the high point of humanity. To be fully human is to be part of a just and loving community. That's when we find what truly the image of God is meant to be. To be in community with God, to be in community with one another, a loving and just community. So there is a bias of algorithms, but the church has a bias, doesn't it? God's bias, as David Shepherd said many, many years ago, God's bias to the poor. That is hardwired into the kingdom. How do we express that in this world of algorithms and learning? And also, we're in community with the rest of the physical universe. So the environmental impact of AI is very important. Some of you will know these kind of headlines in terms of the environmental impact of AI learning. And you see here huge environmental cost, both in energy and water, in training AI. But of course, there's another part to this, and that is what AI might do for us in our environmental stewardship. This is a complex area, but it's an important area in terms of being in community together. And God is a God who's not interested just in some kind of spiritual part of us. God's the God who created every atom and every molecule and every tree and every robot. So how do we care for all of this hardware and steward it well? Fourth, creativity, it seems to me, involves risk. This is where really important questions about data integrity, transparency in terms of black box, AI, decision-making, privacy, use of data become very important. And Catherine has been part of many forums which have talked about this with church leaders and scientists and government leads. And Catherine has this lovely image of whether at this point in terms of risk we feel overpowered or empowered by it. Because AI can do both for us, and there are big ethical issues. How can we be as church trustworthy conversation partners with entrepreneurs, with scientists, with government leads? That means we need to understand risk. Is there a risky area? My colleague at Durham University many years ago, Phil McNaughton, did a very interesting focus group piece of work. He brought together people and talked about how they thought about how science was challenging the future. And what he found was that people came out with various religious stories in terms of how science affects the future. But the stories that many people in the UK came out with were stories about Pandora's box, or stories about not wandering into the realms of the gods. Those are not biblical stories, they're Greek myths. And Phil was quite surprised and argued and said, why isn't it that our Judeo-Christian heritage doesn't shape the stories as we think about science in the future and how we think about risk? Suleiman and Bhaskar talk about how there's a risk of AI might disrupt or even overturn the current geopolitical order, yet to ban the development of new technologies is itself a risk, since technologically stagnant societies are historically unstable and prone to collapse. Fifth, it's all right, I've only got 17 points this morning. Fifth, creativity exists in a fallen world. It exists in the midst of human brokenness. And when coupled with AI, this can become more than just bad individual choices. With all science and technology, you see something going beyond just individual choices. If you've seen the movie Oppenheimer, you'll know how the development of nuclear, particularly nuclear fission, had far-reaching consequences, often not seen at the time. Walter Wink, in a trilogy of books, Unmasking the Powers, talked about how the principalities and powers of this world are in a sense that collective community and socio-economic military complexes that push agendas in order to shape how technology is used and even how technology is developed. And Wink talked about the importance of us talking together about the fallenness, the principalities of this world. Whether it be in sinfulness, whether it be in terms of demonic structures, whether it be simply in those institutions which oppress and develop cultures within themselves. And part of unmasking the powers is this naming the powers, and also it's about affecting Christians to be salt and light within these institutions. Karl Barth talked about how the combination of state and money and ideology and technology can go beyond human sinfulness to become oppressive to many. So this sense of we work with creativity but in a fallen world is something that the church has to name, and a contribution that the church can give. Final thing is this: creativity needs to be seen in the light of new creation. Ilia Delio says, often for many humans, AI is a promise of techno-salvation, a bloodless, dispassionate, Gnostic type of salvation that rests on knowledge alone and promises freedom from suffering and death in cyber eternity. But God's purpose is not about a disembodied neural network. God's purpose from creation is through to new creation, a transformed new heaven and earth, a more than physical hope, not less than physical hope. I'm a Methodist, and therefore I'm under contract to mention the name John Wesley in every talk that I ever give. But Wesley saw the importance of God's salvation arc towards not just redeemed individuals, not just redeemed communities, but a redeemed creation as a whole. We see this transformation glimpsed in the resurrection, the bodily resurrection of Jesus. And we see the direction of this transformation towards a new heaven and earth in the bodily resurrection of Jesus. And therefore, perhaps, as we look at this question of AI, we can think not just of human beings as created co-creators, but also as human beings on the path with the Lord as redeemed co-transformers of this creation. And therefore, I end theologically with a sense. I think the Christians are called to be hopeful realists in all of this. And I'm going to pass on to my friend who'll take us forward now into much more interesting areas. Thank you.
Well, hello. It looks different from up here. Well, first I want to say holy greetings of grace, mercy, and peace, even in the midst of AI. It's true, I have spent at least the last 50 years, I know I don't look it, in tech one way or the other. Most recently, I'm the inventor of a new software called SVT, which dramatically cuts the cost of major technical change. And that, thankfully, will make a difference both in environmental cost, but also in budgets and the ability of leadership to make right decisions. I also want to acknowledge and thank the CTE team who have so kindly invited me, particularly Bishop Mike, General Secretary, for sort of suggesting that I speak today. Thank you, Bishop. I have been here a couple of times before. I'm already meeting some old friends and I'm making some new ones. Thanks also to Reverend Professor David Wilkinson for his unerringly erudite and insightful reflections. He's only taken about half of my thunder. He's even talked about my book. Thank you for that, David. That was really good. I enjoy that. And yeah, so now I have to think about what I've got to say. So I prepared my slides about a fortnight ago, so I need to catch up with some of the things that we've been seeing while we've been here, and I hope this works. Yes. So here are a few more sort of starters for 10, interlinked, possibly random, but foundational questions for what I call faithful innovation. Innovation, particularly technological innovation within a Christian faith context. I'm going to try and weave some cohesive threads linking back to these questions, and we'll see if we can develop some kind of theological framework for integrating AI in a ministry context. This slide primarily addresses a question of capacity and justification. If we can, does it mean we should? We need those theological boundaries for what AI should, and I didn't get that. Yes, this is the slide that I was referring to. We need to ask the right questions to make sure that our use of AI does not take us out of what we believe and what we proclaim. And for example, we heard yesterday about questioning whether what we feel led to do helps or hinders the unity of our community. I think in the context of AI, we also need to ask if adopting AI is going to help our Christian unity, is going to help our Christian community. I'll say that depends, and we're going to come to that shortly. This slide also connects with question 3, which is about whether compassion is a kind of superpower. Interestingly, that also came up yesterday, if you remember. But here we're talking about, or using the example of digital justice and accessibility. Leadership may have the power to introduce AI or other new technology. And we do this quite a lot. You know, a bunch of leaders get together and, I think that one, yes, we'll take that one. But you are not everybody. And there's a question about who will have access to this new technology, who will really benefit from it. Is it just for executive ego? And there's already a huge digital divide in our society. And we need to reflect on this and see whether our ministry, the use of AI in our ministry, adds to that divide. There are ministries I have worked with, and I do work with Christian leaders on these topics, where new technologies are introduced so that we can attract the young people. You know. Yes, but what about those of us who are slightly less than young now? And so we need to think through these things when we're talking about bringing in these technologies into our ministries. We've talked about bias. AI is biased theologically as well. And I want to let you into a secret that the majority of the programmers who write the algorithms for AI did not go to theology college. In fact, the majority of them will be theological illiterates, if not outright biased against Christianity and against our theologies. And so you need to check what you get. Okay, that's the first thing you need, you know. Help me tell somebody next to you, check what you get. Yeah, check what you get. Check what you get. Because you'll be surprised that in the midst of all of that beautiful passage that comes back to you out of AI, right there inside where you least expect, there's a theological time bomb. And you will be responsible when you send that out without first checking it. I enjoy correcting AI. I have a lot of fun with my AI. You know, recently I had to do a class on late medieval theology, and I wondered a bit about, you know, the progression from through the development of the theology of Aquinas, and so I asked this question, threw that into my AI, and it came back with what I considered to be a useless passage, because it completely ignores the influence on Aquinas of, say, the University of Paris, for example, and those who helped to train him, you know, and those who questioned his theology. And so I threw something, and I get, oh, I'm sorry that I missed that out. Let me revise my answer. You know, so we have this, you know, I get a lot of apologies for that, and sometimes, you know, those kinds of things. So you can question your AI, you know. You don't have to take what it says as gospel. I just thought I'd mention that. And the idea that science gives us correct answers. We only have to look back at history, at the number of mistakes that science has also made, many of which are still being corrected. So we need to approach AI with a similar kind of healthy skepticism. Few examples from the spectrum of Christian responses, as you might expect. But it's perhaps very timely that Forum has decided to discuss this, because I think as Christians and as Christian leaders, it's time to grasp the nettle. AI is all around us. It is there in your church. It is there in your office. You know, there are people who are checking what you're preaching on AI. You know, when you see them, you think they're looking up the Bible. They're actually asking AI what AI thinks about what you just said. And you'd be amazed the number of preachers who are using AI when they're preparing sermons. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. But it is there. And so we need to face up to this and begin to think, well, where do we position this and how do we deal with it? There are a number of concerns. We've touched on data management and, of course, our good old friend, the GDPR. Some of these things will emerge, particularly when you start to use AI for some practical purposes in ministry. Maybe you want to try and analyze a database that's got some information about your staff, about volunteers, or even about the wider membership. Then you run into the issues around data protection. So if you are thinking of any of that, that's an area that you need to take very seriously. Once again, the problems can often come much later. This returns to our earlier question about justification and motivation. And then the issues around, will it replace human ministry? Well, I don't think so. You have a pastor Carpenter, I think he's Ron Carpenter, who's come out with an app. You can buy it online, it costs you about £30. And the advertising says that you will have a genuine spiritual encounter with the pastor. Now, is that going to be the Holy Spirit or the spirit of AI? I mean, there are areas where you begin to worry, and perhaps we're not quite ready to go down that road. However, it does pose the question, are value and purpose the same? And I would posit that purpose is what determines value. So we need to decide how we're going to use AI that will bring value to what we do. Churches have sometimes been late adopters of technology. And we can talk about the internet. Yes, we did start to use the internet, but just think if at an earlier stage, churches, particularly the major denominations, had put a big boot in there and said, we want a voice in this. Because when we back off from these developments, it means that our voice is lost in what is happening. And we should have a voice. We have a responsibility, in fact, to have a voice. Otherwise, we are the ones trying to catch up from behind. I think there could even be a potential for a vertical AI that is for the use of Christian ministry. A vertical AI is when you have a specialized AI that deals with everything that is needed in a particular context. It's something that I wasn't too familiar with until I started doing some research recently for a startup, a Far Eastern startup, a unicorn startup, who are developing vertical AI. And talking to some of the executives there as I began to write the paper, I discovered how powerful this actually is. So if you think about, in the old days, you have a company who would decide to do a vertical integration, right? They would decide to own the farms that produced the potatoes, the trucks that, the harvesters that harvested them, the trucks that carried them to the factory. They own the factory, they own the distribution, they own the shop that sells the crisps. That's vertical integration. Okay. Similarly, you could have an AI that is developed, particularly by some of the larger ministries among us, or even an ecumenical AI developed by CTE. Well, why not? And you can build them for much less than you think these days. And that gathers all of the information that could be required by everybody who is working in that field. So anybody in any of the member churches or organizations, they want to start a community project, or so they could go in there, they could type it, and AI will give them all of the information about the history of those kinds of projects and what kind of problems, what kind of funding areas, and all of that would come back out of the AI. I think that we need to be imaginative. And we need to show that we are able to take ownership of what creation has allowed us to emerge. So, these are some of the concerns that we mentioned. I think those would be fairly common among us. So if we're to come up with a framework for integration, what might we try to do? Well, I think we should pray. I pray for technology quite a bit. My younger days, I was a marine telecom engineer, and they would fly me onto a ship way out at sea, and they show me something that was broken. And I'd start by praying. And people would ask me, "What are you doing?" I'd say, "I'm consulting the chief engineer." And I would get insights. You know, something would drop into my spirit and say, "Look at it from this perspective." And when I did so, I'd get an answer. I'm not saying go home and do this, you know, and blame me when your cooker blows up or whatever. But I do think that before we go into something like this, that has such great import, it should be concerted, something we should concentrate some prayer on to start with. And there will be gifts around you. We've heard about people in your church. You'd be amazed how much AI knowledge there is. You can come up with a group of people who can help inform your policy, help inform the diversity that needs to be represented within this move of your ministry. And we need to realize that we are not substituting AI for anybody. In fact, I think that ministry is one of the places where employment is also a kind of ministry. And we often take people on to help them in their development. I think it would be wrong to just, you know, I mean, the whole ministry now runs like AI, but there's no people left. I mean, what would it be? It wouldn't be ministry. So what can we do to move forward? Well, David very kindly pointed out, you know, what I said in the past about clarity of strategic purpose. I think you need to be very, very clear about the strategic need, the business need, what are the options, the capabilities out there, what will suit you best, and why. Always keep asking yourself, why? Why are we doing this? It's not so that you can come to Forum and tell the person sitting next to you, "We've got AI now." And then we must align our plans with the strategy and ethos. Remember, we said the value is in how we use it. We need to evaluate factors like data quality, technical feasibility. I have clients who have bitten off far more than they can chew, and sometimes far more than their staff can deal with. I do quite a lot of work in the health sector, and a couple of years ago there was a client who shall remain nameless, who spent many, many millions to acquire a new system, and we were called back months later because they found out that all the training that they had done, there were still so many people within the context of using that technology, that digital technology, who lacked the skills and the confidence to use it for the strategic purpose for which it was acquired. And so we had to go back and do a whole different program of bringing those people up and on board. I'm not complaining about it. They paid me well. Okay. But as my brothers and sisters, I must share this with you so that I don't have to come and charge you. I will give you a good price. Okay. So I think that we need to be faithful in our innovation. We need to develop and use the tools that amplify our ministry, that move our calling into this age in which we live. I mean, somebody asked once, would Jesus have used a computer? Would he have allowed one of the disciples to have a laptop? I thought it was a very good question, actually. And I think that he would.
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. Yes. Peter, how's the membership going? You know, just check, Lord. Let us remain true to our theological foundations. Let us test everything and hold fast what is good. And for some questions for you, where do you see the greatest potential for AI in your ministry? When you go back from here, what can you say to your colleagues about what you've heard here today? What's the most pressing theological concern for you? And what guardrails would you like to see put in place before AI is implemented in your ministry? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Archbishop, and thank you, David. They both have kindly said that they would be happy to receive a couple of questions each. We find this a very difficult process because we have to run around with a microphone, so we're literally only going to take a couple of questions, two to David and two to Archbishop Doyé. So if you would both like to come back together, and if someone could take this, well, I suppose if I throw it out, the person that catches it can ask the no. So I'll just pass this down. Oh, there we go. Yes, yeah, there we are. Yeah. And I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions, but we'll take what we get. So perhaps first, if you'd just like to say who you'd like your question to go to. Yes, there. Yeah, you do that.
This can actually go to both of them, actually. You mentioned the challenge of, if you like, skewed data and things like that, and perhaps didn't talk about that so much. I just wonder if you can give advice to us on how best to manage and test things. I guess AI is a tool for that, but it's also a threat to us, and I think a lot of people have no idea where to start on that. So it's a very broad question, but...
Okay, well, one thing with tools, it depends, what you ask them to do for you. So in AI, it has the grand title of prompt engineering. Any prompt engineers in the house? Oh, yeah, there's Bishop here. Oh, right. Okay. He was just adjusting his... And prompts are the way you structure what you ask AI. And AI will follow what it thinks is the logic of what you have said. And I've actually got something about that will soon be available. But if you pop round to the bookshop later, you can pick up some information about some of this. But I would say that's the way to go. You don't. If you ask AI a very general question, what is theology? You're going to get a very general answer. You need to think about what it is, what outcome you want, and then you begin to narrow it down. And it's iterative. So you take the first answer, and then you follow up with another answer, and then eventually you get something that is close to what you're looking for. So you can't go back, you can't go in and change the data, but you can restrict the way that AI uses it to answer you by the way you frame the logic that you give AI to work with.
I was at a meeting with the Free Churches on Thursday where we were talking about this, and one of the speakers gave this lovely image and said, imagine AI to be an intern at work. And they said, just as you would feed the questions and then judge and test what came out, imagine AI to be an intern with all of the joy and all of the difficulty that might entail. So I think just recognizing its limits, but in terms of biased data, I think we're dealing with that all of the time. AI just amplifies that. And so how we teach young people, particularly in my context of higher education, how you judge how answers are related to data is part of the critical tools. And within science we do this through apprenticeship in terms of doctoral studies, and we talk about people building a feel for science. So that when you present data and you get a conclusion, there has to be a feel that is kind of in the right ballpark. Because if it's not, then you go back and you question whether you've got the right data inputting. Now that's developing the critical mind in a way that loops back then to say, have I asked the right question or not? Have I taken enough data into it? But I think also we've just got to recognize that we live now in a culture which is deeply polarized in providing data. And we can see that in terms of how certain presidents over the water kind of view the world. Limited data leads to, skewed data leads to certain conclusions. And that's not even artificial intelligence. But that's an issue for all of us. And I think going back to what it means for all voices to be present in the room in providing data is really important. And what a joy it is to have a church which is multi-generational, multicultural, global, where we together as a church can actually collect data from so many different places, all focusing on Jesus Christ. What a gift we might have to challenge some of the limited... Sorry, I'll shut up.
We've got time just for one more question. I see Justine has managed to catch the microphone, and you'll have 30 seconds each to answer it.
Okay. Oh, whoa. This kind of follows on, actually, and I suppose, but it is again to both of you. So, Yanis Varoufakis, who was Greek finance minister once upon a time, said that the world is moving from capitalism into techno-feudalism. And then instead of owning physical things, people are now owning the kind of pathways to finding information or to receiving information. How do we as a church speak into a new culture of potential feudalism which can kind of cause fear to be rampant?
Gosh, 30 seconds. What a profound question. And I think there's something about feudalism is a particular power structure, and we challenge that through servant leadership, so that we give and offer rather than take, defend, and use over other people. But that needs then to be spelled out, but that's my 30 seconds.
Thank you. I would like to see the voice of the church, informed voice of the church in the conversation, and churches who have the resources showing that they have skin in the game. And I see no reason why among us there are not groups who can challenge this so that it doesn't have to be just feudal lords, but also the Lord of Lords.
Thank you. David and Doyé, you've inspired me to rewrite a well-known song. It goes like this. I feel it in my headset. I feel it in my phone. AI is all around me, as David and Doyé have shown. Thank you. So we now have 2 minutes leg stretch, and that's to stretch legs. There isn't time for coffee. You get some water, and we will resume absolutely on in 3.5 minutes' time. So please do shuffle, leg stretch, and we'll be giving you a prize for the best shuffle.